What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Jordan Kurtz here with comments from the Peanut Gallery and the MMA Plug powered by Mile High Sports. Want to take a quick second to talk to you about UFC Fight Night Hooker versus Poirier. Now, this is going to be the last time that we're seeing cards here stateside at the UFC APEX in Las Vegas before the promotion heads off for a few weeks to Abu Dhabi at Fight Island. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the card. In the main event, you have number 3 lightweight Dustin Poirier against number 5 Dan Hooker. Now, my gut tells me to put the house on Poirier in this fight. Yes, Dan Hooker hits hard. There is no denying that, and he is definitely someone who has earned that number 5 position. However, you're talking Dustin Poirier, someone who has risen all the way to the top of the division and almost saw himself get over the hump when he had that guillotine initially on Khabib last September. Obviously, didn't work out for him in that regard, but he still sits as the number 3 fighter, which initially when I saw the matchup kind of had me shocked because I still a lot of times have the image of Barbosa and Hooker in my mind for whatever reason. But if you take a look at the top 5 of that division, it's pretty log jammed, and there's not a whole lot of options that would have been there right now for Dustin or for Dan. Because you have obviously Khabib as the champion, going to be fighting against Justin Gaethje here in the next few months. Then behind him, you have Tony Ferguson, who just fought against Justin Gaethje. Then at 3, you have Dustin Poirier. Number 4, you have Conor McGregor, who has now retired more times than he's actually fought in the lightweight division. And then at number 5, you have Dan Hooker. Either way, that's a potential fight of the year candidate. I am very excited to see what they're going to bring for the main event. Taking a look at the co-main event, it's going to be pure madness. I mean, I'm a Mike Perry fan. I think Mike Perry is a little bit off his rocker at times with this whole situation of not taking anybody in his corner aside from his girlfriend. Mickey Gall is not someone that is a slouch. Yes, is Mickey a little bit more on the green side from who Perry has fought throughout some of his more recent matchups? Absolutely, 100%. This is a potentially a very good bounce back opportunity for Mike Perry, who's coming off of a couple of losses to Vicente Luque and to Jeff Neal. One thing that can be said, even if Perry hasn't had a traditional camp, corner, coaching staff, anything along those lines, he does have an intangible characteristic to his game, and he's a dog. When you talk about a fighter, Mike Perry is a fighter. There's a lot of guys who are athletic, who can learn how to fight, but there's not a lot of guys who will fight, have that scrap to the bone sort of mentality, and be willing to literally go out on their shield in there. And Mike Perry's one of those guys. So you can never count someone out that has that JYD in him. I'm going to go with Perry as far as that pick goes. Then when we take a look at the feature fight, we have Brendan Allen against Kyle Daukaus. Brendan Allen is a huge favorite in this one. Brendan Allen's been talking a bunch of shit about Ian because Ian got hurt. I mean, Brendan Allen, he got lucky that he has an opportunity to win 2 checks because he definitely wouldn't have if Ian was still the matchup. But, he also ducked out a couple of matchups of other guys like Dustin Jacoby, Anthony Adams. He took what was proverbial or on paper the easiest matchup for him, another jiu-jitsu guy in Daukaus, he's a next nation finisher, which fits right into Allen's game as a jiu-jitsu guy. He trains all the time with Gerald Mearshart, who is a submission wizard. But it's gonna be a tough one on the ground because either one of them can catch either of each other at any given point. I do think though that Allen has the better strength of schedule, which I think will allow him to prevail in this short notice switch up against Daukaus here. Then we look at the crochet boss, my boy Maurice Green. He's looking to bounce back in a big way against Gian Villante, who weighed in at a big 250 today. I mean, Gian formerly competed at light heavyweight. He has fought at heavyweight before, and he did compete in college as a dual sport athlete, as a middle linebacker, as well as a wrestler at Hofstra in New York, up there with Chris Weidman and the boys. But And it's hard to root against Gian because Gian is just he's a goofball. I love his personality. That's a guy who all you got to do is put the camera on him and he's gonna make you laugh. He's gonna entertain you. That being said, Mo is a very talented fighter. Mo is 6'7". He is a giant. That man is a beast. He has glory kickboxing experience underneath his belt. He's gone down to Jackson Wink away from Colorado when he was up here at Factory X. One big thing for him is that he has heavyweights to train with now. I mean, it's just anywhere that you go, it's very tough to find human beings that are that big. And Jackson just happened to has a couple of big bodies that were able to get him down there to train like Juan Adams. So I like Mo in this matchup here against Vellante. Then, when we're looking at the next matchup, the first fight of the main card is Sean the Sniper Woodson taking on Juicy J Julian Erosa. Julian Erosa's had a few different stints and opportunities with the UFC. He kind of came to his his mainstream fame, if you will, back in the day in The Ultimate Fighter. It was the season of America versus Europe, I believe. It was whichever season that Connor and Uriah were coaching. That was he ultimately he saw his elimination from the show after Artem Lovov knocked him out. He then was able to get back into the UFC by way of the Contender Series. A couple of years down the way after staying hot and active on the regional scene, picking up a bunch of wins along the way. He did run into a freight train when he was here in Denver for the UFC 25th anniversary show against Devontae Smith. And then he, like I say, he just went on a little bit of a skid there, got cut last year, and then has now since been brought back after picking up a win on the regional scene earlier this year. I mean, if you're really feeling froggy, Julian Erosa is a solid vet. He's sitting, at the time of this right now, he's sitting at a plus 331 underdog. It could potentially have a higher return. Don't put a lot on it because I think that Woodson is definitely going to get the job done. He comes from a solid camp. He comes from great coaching with James Krause over there in his corner. So I think he gets it done. He's sitting at the 480 favorite right now. Taking a look at the main event of the prelims, we have the fan favorite Luis Violent Bob Ross Pena taking on Kama the Death Star Worthy. So Pena comes in as a favorite, but you can't count Kama Worthy out of a fist fight. Kama came into the UFC and had one of the biggest upsets of the year last year at UFC 241. Pena is a tough veteran. He was a part of that undefeated series when it was Stipe versus DC, and he currently sits at 8-2. He's a tough matchup for a lot of people in that division just based off of his size. He's 6'3" and fights at 155 pounds. I like the upset though. I like the upset on this one. I think that Kama Worthy is hungry. I think that he is ready to put a stamp on another performance here. With Pena making his transition from AKA down to ATT, I think that they're maybe going to shy away from him wanting to stand and bang so much with Kama, but we'll see. We'll see. It's a smaller cage, so it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out for them. Then if we take a look at the next matchup in the heavyweight division, we have Felipe Lins, who he made his UFC debut last month against Andrei Arlovsky, and he lost the decision, but prior to that, he had been on a 4-fight win streak with 4 finishes. He tore through the 2018 PFL season and won that $1 million prize. With Tanner Boser, it's even money. It's a tough matchup, solid matchup for each of them, but the ability to finish, I think, just happens to give me the nod in favor of Felipe Lins in this particular matchup. Then we have a switch up. It was originally Takashi Sato against Ramiz Brahimaj. I'm totally butchering that name, but it just got switched up over the last day to Jason Witt. Shout out to the Vanilla Gorilla. He got the call yesterday at around 12:30 in the afternoon from his manager Jason House and was directly to the airport. Didn't even go home to pack his bags or anything. Was in Vegas by 2 o'clock. Cleared all his medicals. Made weight this morning and is ready to go change his life tomorrow night. I like this matchup for the short notice fill in Jason Witt. I think that he comes from the same camp that Sean Woodson comes from out there. That's James Krause's team, Glory in Lee Summit, Missouri. There's a lot of solid talent that's out there that's continuing to bubble up, and the kid is Midwest tough. If you look at it, he's making his debut, but he has more fights. So when you look at the history that Sato's also had in relation to deficiencies in the grappling department, I really think that this matchup favors Witt. So whenever you see that line drop, I think that that's a safe play. Take the bet on Witt in that particular matchup. Then I'm particularly excited to see this next matchup. You have Jordan Griffin against my boy Yusuf the Moroccan Devil Zalal. Now, Jordan Griffin was supposed to fight a couple of weeks ago against Derek Minner in a rematch from their LFA days, but Minner fell ill in the weight cut process, and the fight was ultimately scrapped. In steps Yusuf the Moroccan Devil Zalal on literally about a week's notice to take this fight. He's a 23-year-old prospect that is reflective of this new generation of successful mixed martial artists who is a complete mixed martial artist. Yeah, they're going to have some strengths in particular areas where they're maybe a little bit more elite than others, but a guy like Yusuf is good everywhere. You saw that in his first matchup against Austin Lingo. He showed wrestling, he showed jiu-jitsu, he showed striking. It's going to be interesting because Yusuf is going to have to fight in a smaller cage for this particular matchup. However, one thing to keep in mind is these guys spar in a smaller cage every single week throughout their camp and during their training. So, yeah, it plays a difference, but it may not be as big of a difference for them in their psyche and their mind. They're going out there and they're fighting, and not necessarily taking into account, oh man, I have 30% less square footage to work with here. No, they're going to go out and they're going to fight. Jordan Griffin relies a lot on his jiu-jitsu. He is pretty spotty as far as his striking blend into his grappling. He also, in that fight against TJ Brown, showed some weaknesses, as well as in the Dan Ige fight, I should say, but has showed weakness against strong offensive grappling or strong offensive wrestling. I think that with the work that Yusuf has put in recently, he's had some time on the mats with Joe Warren, the former U.S. and world champion for that matter, Greco wrestler, along with a bunch of the Olympians from the Olympic Training Center that have came up to Factory X to train with him. Yusuf is quick and precise on the feet. Jordan Griffin did get sat down in the first round right away by TJ Brown. Yusuf is so fast and precise with his striking and elusive with that movement. I mean, he has footwork like Dominic Cruz and head movement like Pernell Sweet Pea Whitaker. It's going to be tough for Griffin to touch him. I definitely take Yusuf in this matchup. Next matchup, we have Kay Hansen against Jin Free. And I apologize for butchering that name as well. It's one of the first times that I've heard it was this week. But when you take a look at this particular matchup, they're both making their debut. They're both fresh off of the Invicta circuit. For those who don't know, Invicta is a women's only promotion that has birthed a lot of the big UFC stars that have became future champions. Now, Frey has a smaller frame. She's never fought at 115 pounds. She was an atom weight for Invicta, so for those who don't know the weight classes, that's 105 pounds. She's never fought professionally at a weight bigger than 108 pounds, in which it was a catchweight bout for Ryzen a couple of years ago. It's going to be interesting to see how she reacts to having to carry that much extra weight, because when you think of it in terms of percentages, someone who was only 110 going to 115, that 10 pounds may not be as much of a deal for someone who is going from 145 to 155 when you're just looking at total percentage of your body mass. So with that being said, I do have to think that Kay Hansen is going to be the favorite in this particular matchup. She is the physically stronger fighter, so I think that will work to her advantage, especially in the smaller cage where she can use her grappling to essentially be able to close off any sort of elusive angles or evasive tactics in the defense from Frey. It's throwing a dart at the wall, but like I say, I am going with Hansen for this particular matchup. The UFC Fight Night card is gonna have an earlier start time than usual. It's gonna start off at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, so make sure that you tune in. Yusuf is the second fight of the night, so do not miss this. I promise you that it is gonna be worth watching and it'll be entertaining. This is gonna be the last one, like I say, at the UFC Apex before they're off to Fight Island as of the next month. So, thank you very much for following. If you like the video, please like, share, and subscribe. I'm Jordan Kurtz with comments from the Peanut Gallery and the MMA Plug powered by Mile High Sports. Thank you very much and have a great day.